you, Shanita, for letting us know. And recording has started. Go ahead.
Hi, everybody. My name is Morella Bivens. You can't hear me? Can you hear
I
me?
can't hear you.
Okay, we're good. Okay. Thank you again to Echo Araceli. Thank you again for welcoming us.
Can
For
anybody
joining
else hear
today's
her?
session.
Yeah, we
Yes.
can hear her.
You can?
Yes. Joining today's session, Laura and Shanita, and we are anticipating more to join. We are excited to have three dynamic women, experts in their field, to pretty much share best practices and offer tips to make your job maybe easier, maybe talk about maybe some challenges that you may face on a daily basis, all in the hopes and thoughts to impact the communities and the individuals that you support on a daily basis. We have the sales guru herself, Ashley Quinto Powell, who was awesome. We have also Miss Veronica Figueroa Valdez. I hope I did not butcher your last name. I'm sorry if I did, but who is also very skilled in business administration and also grant writing and dissecting and all of the above and community engagement and things of that nature. And then we have our gracious host and culture connector and sponsor diva, Miss Araceli Esperanza. So I'm excited about today's session and I hope you are too. Just make sure that if you have any questions, put those in the chat. I will be monitoring the chat. And we will absolutely have a question and answer portion near the end of the event, this session. So I think that's everything, Araceli. I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to you. Take it from here.
Thank you, Marilla.
You're welcome.
For this beautiful introduction and just opening the space right now. I kind of want to introduce and call in the folks that are with us today. If you guys could, we put it in the chat, if y'all ladies can introduce yourselves and answer why you are here today and what would you like to learn more about. Don't rush to say it first.
Hello.
Sure, go ahead.
Hi. So my name is Shanita Roach, and I'm here to learn more about everything of this topic of range, from sales to grant writing to marketing in business. I think all of this is important as I myself being an entrepreneur. The more knowledge and information that I gather and more networking that I do, I feel the better I become as far as being a quality CEO of my business and being able to network with some very informative and knowledgeable and women who are experts in their own field and their own right. So I'm honored to be in this space. Thank you for hosting this.
Thank you for coming, Shanita. Shades of you and shades of me. If you could later on, that would be awesome if you put your websites down in the chat as well, and we can certainly do like a share connection sheet afterwards. Whoever would like to go next, we are just introducing ourselves and just asking and seeing if this resonates, why you're here and what more would you like to learn today?
Well, if we're doing so not in the chats, I'm Laura Paisley Beck. I own WAM Rights LLC. WAM is WA''AM. So think ma'am, but then, turn the M upside down. And I'm actually currently getting DEI certified. So I can help businesses, business leaders, other entrepreneurs look at their their marketing and any other messaging through the DEI lens. DEI is really important to me. So it's just been great networking with awesome, inspirational women entrepreneurs and absorbing as much knowledge as I can. I feel like I'm in like my own winter semester right now before 2022 starts.
Thank you.
Love it.
Whoever would like to come in next, for those of us who just joined, we're just kind of introducing ourselves and just, you know, calling what we'd like to learn more of or what we're enjoying. Oh, by the way, this is being recorded. And if you need captioning or any kind of assistance with accessing the video, please let me know. Oh, okay. Someone's having some tech issues with sound, for sure. Oh, Larissa, I would love to see your face. But we've been chatting and getting to know each other online, so it's beautiful seeing you here today. And Shadira and whoever else, if they want to, just go ahead and put your LinkedIn or your business links in the chat, or just however people can get a hold of you. I think we're gonna just start off with this first question. So we open up this space today to really talk and dive into why it's important to build women of color in positions of grants, sales, donor, or fundraising positions in the context of equity building and inclusion. So when I thought about this, I meant, you know, through my training as well, through DEI, but after so many years of being in the nonprofit industry as well, I was like, you know, the way we even bring in more diversity through supplier, right? Through supplier contracts and procurement processes, either through conference building. And that's something I've been doing for many, many years, is anytime I'm organizing a conference or what have you, we go out and make these solutions happen where we can grow other people's economy left and right. And I call this like micro capitalism, where we exchange, we increase the exchange within groups. And I think it's a way for me, it's a way that I have found, and I'm sure a lot of people have found many different ways to kind of break apart capitalism in a way that is more based on exchange and leveraging social capital of people of color, because that is the one thing that people of color, marginalized communities do have, is the attention. And so as we walk in, and so having and being able to name that, I think too, through sponsorship packages and so forth, and we can talk about that later. But the reason I brought in all of us is to talk about the gap, right? We know about education gaps, there's wage gaps, right? And so forth. And there's all these gaps. And even in the wage gap, there's even a gap between white women and women of color earnings. And even so, I think if you even added more intersectionality of, say, immigration or what have you, you would even see a bigger gap. And so how do we close those gaps is not only just by calling in power wherever we are and advocating for folks, but I thought it would be really neat when I saw these positions open up lately in Dane County for fundraising positions. I was like, you know, that's another way too. And that's one of the ways that we want to help women out in Midwest Mujeres Collective, is like through networking groups like ourselves. And we're all doing some sort of exchange and stretching economy. So I'll let Veronica and or Ashley come in and talk about what attracted them to this conversation.
Veronica, please.
Just a question, Araceli, because you're...
Sure. No, yeah, I did kind of go in a lot of different places, but like, why is it important for us to build women of color in positions of grant, sales, and donor and fundraising positions? If we could each talk about why we found that to be in particular important.
From the perspective of directing an organization, especially when you're talking about grant writing, I think that as you see what happens in funding sources and how cities and counties distribute that funding, the narrative continues to be that mainstream organization gets the larger part of the money, and then local grassroots organizations get the low level funding, right? So I think that having more people of color leading in positions of leadership, and also having the opportunity and the ability to write grants, help us also change the narrative and really make sure that when we are not only applying for grants out there, and we're vigilant about the funding, they will also have the capacity to be able to advocate at a different level that we need to be advocating for, right? So if I'm a grant writer and I'm a person of color leading a nonprofit organization that is also supporting people of color, then I'm able to put myself at the center of the conversations, right? And impact how those funding sources are going to be directed in the future. And the more we have people of color doing this work and really making a mark in our society, the more likely are these funding sources will become more equitable to really provide services and support to everyone at the same level. And I think it's, you know, I've been in nonprofit work for the last 16 years of my life, and it gets exhausting. The funding part gets really exhausting. The politics behind funding, it's very exhausting, to say the least. But I think that the more of us that are there advocating for that main goal of equitable funding sources, the more we're going to be able to be heard and have a larger impact with the work that we are already doing that is underfunded.
I love it. Thank you so much, Larissa, for calling in who you are and what you've been doing in the chat. Thank you. Ashley?
Sure. So I actually, I think about it from a slightly different perspective. You know, these are incredible jobs, and when you can tie data and revenue to what you can bring to the table at a job, you can eradicate so much of the bias that a hiring manager may have. Because if you can say, hey, listen, bring me on to your organization, and I will bring in $1 million worth of donations. There's almost no salary that you can ask for that they shouldn't give you, because you have this data to back it up. And you know, there's flexibility baked in for people with families, for instance, and they're just good jobs. And so it's you know, these sorts of roles, sales in particular, have been typically held by young white men because of the way that they're paid, largely on commission. You know, there's a narrative that we need to keep salespeople hungry, and that usually means we'll pay them. We won't pay them so that they have to scramble. And actually, as more people of color come into sales as an industry, that's starting to change, because that's not tenable for people who didn't, for instance, just graduate from college and are still living with their parents. And I think really deeply about building generational wealth and the ways that our work should be compensated. You know, if you join a not-for-profit and they paid the last person $75,000, but they're going to pay you $60,000, you're essentially making a $15,000 donation to the not-for-profit, which you probably would not have done if you had gone in eyes wide open. So I do think it's really important to get to have women of color in particular in positions where they can be building generational wealth and running and leading organizations. So it's important for them and their families, and of course for the organization as a whole.
Thank you so much for sharing that and sharing the perspective of like what it means to build equity in the sales area, and what it means to look at it through that. And that's what the inclusion part of this workshop I wanted to call in, was that we all know people that we can refer people to these positions that we see in the community, or we're part of maybe the hiring process, or we're part of like drafting that position. Let's really give equity to learned experiences. And one thing, as an organizer, whether or not that people know it, it's like you're already doing donor relationships. You already are brokering deals. You already are in sales and marketing, and you're an influencer in your own right. And coming from that, from that area, it doesn't mean that going into these type of positions makes you any less, and it makes it more valuable to lean in on those traits that you might already have for building exchange, but building that social impact. And I think that a lot of times we don't give social impact the net value, the resource value it's really worth. And they take advantage of it. They take advantage of it by following us and just take our speed or ideas. Men tend to do this a little. Even I would even go to say men of color. I've seen do this quite often to other brown and Black women. And so we see it everywhere. We see it everywhere. And as women, we got to come together. And that's why I think just even seeing us, and I think it's different in Madison than it might be in other cities. We do see a lot of particularly white women in leadership positions in nonprofit world. But I think that's not the same in all cities as well. And we'll see a stronger increase of men in those positions than we would than we do in the city, or maybe it is. But regardless, I still feel like there's room for us to grow into these positions, and room for us to either replicate these systems so that we're pursuing our own. And I want to call in that each of us all three of us, I was telling people, like, this workshop is probably worth like $2,000 to $3,000 considering like what each of us are doing individually. And Ashley, and if you guys don't follow her, please do follow her on LinkedIn. She has My VA Rocks organization, and I'll let her talk a little bit about that and how she's building equity in her business. And then Veronica also does equity building through her other nonprofit DAMA and other initiatives as a graphic designer for so many beautiful brown and Black led organizations in town. If you guys want to call in a little bit about how you're building that into the passion projects or the business that you're actually creating, that would be awesome.
Well, I'm really excited about the opportunity to talk about this because I think about it all the time, and I obviously get really excited. But I own 3 businesses that I run concurrently, and they all sort of came out of one another. My primary business is as a revenue consultant, and I help folks in an agency model who are selling their own work and teach them how to do relationship-based sales for large deal sizes, typically between 5 figures to the low 7 figures. And as part of that, I kept making the recommendation that people hire a virtual assistant because you can, like, we have this great Midwestern work ethic, and you can really get stuck in doing literally everything. And actually, like, I have children. I don't want to do everything. I want to occasionally like hang out with them because they're pretty cool, small people. Then on the other side of, then on the other piece of that business, I speak a lot about being a working mom. And I don't know if anyone else went through pandemic parenting, but man, that was a waking nightmare. So I spent the whole time thinking, this is so miserable, but I work for myself. And so I can go a whole year without making any of my goals and not be fired because I own the business. Right? I mean, it cannot make money. That's different. I get to keep my job. And so I knew that women who had bosses had to lie, essentially. You can't say, hey, I'm drowning. This is the most miserable I've ever been. I don't understand how children require this many snacks and this much technical support. And also you expect me to be online for 8 or 9 hours a day. And as a result, unsurprisingly, we lost, by some estimates, as many as 11 million women from the workforce last year. And I knew that talent didn't just go away. And so when I founded My VA Rocks, it was as a way to tap into essentially what I thought were women and moms. And as it turns out, it's of course, a lot of different people in a lot of situations. Although we are, the last time I took note, we were about 50% women of color and 70% moms. And I'm starting to think of us as a lily pad. You know, when people who are extraordinarily talented need to take a step back, or to just take a pause from big corporations and need flexibility and interesting work, they can, you know, I'm happy to scoop them up and keep them as long as they need it. And as it turns out, that's something that clients really value, and it's been taking off like a rocket. Okay, so I'm so sorry that I just like launched into that, but I do get so excited because I think the twin
Oh, no, you're
areas.
fine. I get it. We get it. We all want some of it. We all want some of that love. So thank you.
Well,
so
I think the twin areas of like, all right, we get to help people on both sides of the equation, right? I get to create this like landing spot and help overwhelmed professionals. And it's not this is, you know, I still want to get paid for my work too. You know, that is still really important to me. And I think that everyone doing incredible hard work should be paid fairly for it.
That's what my daughter said when I told her about our workshop. She's like, so wait, is everybody getting paid to come? I'm like, oh no, that's level 2, honey. That's what's gonna happen. That's level 2.
I love it.
Yes, absolutely. That's how my last workshop went. And we all got paid some way, shape, form. But Veronica, tell us about what's going on in your camp. What's going on in your playground?
Well, my playground has changed. For a long time there, I was working with victims of domestic violence, sexual assault, and human trafficking. We went through a hell of a year last year supporting survivors in the middle of a pandemic and trying to access people and find safe places for people in the middle of a pandemic, right? So after 11 years working in that field, I this year resigned for that position, and now I am a full-time artist. So I took a leap of faith on my own career path in terms of my going back to my roots, which is art, design, and healing all in one, and really bringing that back into the community. So now I not only have a little bit more time to invest in my own business, which is a graphic design and educational component in terms of workshops and things like that for young people who like to experience art in a different light. And also the executive director of Dane Arts Mural Arts, which works with communities, building relationships, building capacity sometimes at organizations through art making and making murals around the city. So beautifying the city with color, but more than anything, beautifying the people that touch every single mural that we put out there, as our work is very focused in community engagement through art making. So that's what I've been doing. And in terms of, I think that something that you said, Ashley, about flexibility, right? Why should we have women of color and women in general, right, in positions of power? And I think that has to do also with the fact that we get each other, especially when we have children or when we're struggling with things, right? And I think through the pandemic, one of the biggest things that I kept going back to was the staff at Unidos, making sure that people had the flexibility and the time to take a break or a breather and kind of really checking on each other's emotional needs as well, and building equity within the organization as well, right? So we do as leaders in our organizations also have the potential and the power to level the playing field for those who work for us, right? That me as the director you know, when I'm the director and I'm making 150,000 a year and my staff is only making $15 an hour, that says a lot to me about equitable sustainability of the people that you work with. And to me, that as a nonprofit organization executive director, this one being my second organization that I get to lead, fortunate to lead, one thing that I always go back is advocating for those that I work with, making sure that the people that I work with also are making good money, that I'm not the one here taking the whole pie for myself. So equitable and sustainable homes for those who work for us will make a bigger impact in the work that you're doing in the organization and in the community if you treat those that you work with well and pay them well. You know, oftentimes when we
Yeah,
work,
because there's so much a turnaround in the
Yeah.
nonprofit world, and that's the whole thing, is like the turnaround. And I think for
Yeah.
people who are listening to this and might be like, don't even have a job like that, or so I wanted to get a job like that. How do I even get in the door? I think what Veronica's telling us here is look at how much they're paying everyone and see if they're valuing you there. That's one way to screen them before they screen you out. Anyways.
Yeah, you know, I hired a person one time at Unidos and he said, well, I accept the job, but before I accept the job, I actually want to come over and interview the staff. And I was like, what? I've never had this happening before. I'm like, you're going to come and interview me and the staff? So he wouldn't accept the job until he came by and interview every person in the staff and sit down with me and interview me and ask me very valid questions. What is it that you value about working here? Why are you working here? What is the revenue? Where is it coming from? I mean, all of these things that I was like, interested. I've never been interviewed by an employer before, right? And then he accepted the job. And what that taught me is that, yeah, why not? I mean, I don't get to be sitting on the hot spot only. You also, if you want my skills, I want to know about you and why is it so important for you to hire either someone like me, or what is the value of your work? What is it that you're doing out there? And I want to say that, you know, one of the best employees I ever had, was this particular person, and just taking that time to really not only go into the website and learn about the organization, but actually digging in and diving in with people in the organization to understand the work that we do. I think that speaks volumes for someone that you're hiring that really have the passion to do the work that you want them to do. But I think that the biggest part for me as a director is that I'm making sure that people that the funds that I'm requesting, that wealth is going to be poured into the staff, because oftentimes we work in jobs that require us to help others. And then I don't know if any of you have seen that the form that the government requests for certain grants where you have to certify that this person is under the poverty level, right? So one time I took at that sheet, took a look at the sheet, and I'm like, wait a minute, we are all in the poverty level working in this organization. We need to change this narrative.
Yes.
And we need to advocate for our bilingualism also to be valued, right? Because we take a longer time than a monolingual person to get things across to people. So, and that's when I started working towards really balancing that, you know, the playing field in terms of salaries for the staff.
That's an amazing journey. Thank you so much for talking about that, Veronica, about the pull and the push and the back end, because I think too, as applicants and women who I called in to come to this, is like women who are also thinking of like, either I'm going up on the ladder in nonprofit industry, these are the things I should be looking for. And I think that's what you're saying is wise. It's like a two-way interview on that. And one thing that I'm moving on to our next part of our conversation is we want to like kind of pick our brains on like our top three high notes. I'll go first this time around. So these are my 3 tips for donor relationship building for Black, Latino, and people of color led organizations. And how do you leverage social capital? So when we're talking about social impact, the increases are short-term economy. There's an exchange that happens, and this exchange is both cultural and has an impact. And it's important for us to name that impact. And I think a lot of times this is the advantage and disadvantage about people of color and marginalized communities, is that they want our monies, they want our attention, but they feel it should be almost given, because we're just there. We can just appear and be there. I contend that it has a lot more to do than that. And so when we actually write about that in our proposals, in the packages that we offer our sponsors, and we make sure that our missions are aligned. So whoever we're trying to get a sponsorship fund from, we want to make sure that their mission and the mission that the work that we're doing, either our passion project or our for-profit business, is aligned. We want to look for easy collaboration moments. And Ashley can talk a little bit about that, which she's been kind of finding out, and now is offering grant writing. I don't know if you checked out in the chats, Ashley, but somebody here is in need of a grant writer. And so maybe that is also opens up for there being this established trust then, right? So there's an established trust that begins to happen between that sponsorship and donorships. And how do we establish that trust is by following some of them on social media, getting the scoop on how they are funded. And Veronica talked about that, about the reverse interview process. And I think that's valid even for people that you're asking money from, you know, and assess your value. Assess your value in terms of percentages and dollar amounts, and then go 20% over. Someone told me a long time ago when I first started my consulting work. I think Ashley knows already. She's smiling. Is like to charge people like I'm a white man behind a BMW. For this Gen Xer, that analogy works, right? This nowadays it would be like that Elon Musk car, right? Tesla is a white guy behind a Tesla or something. But still, I think that's the mentality that we need to go over, because as Veronica was saying, you know, we can already look at the salaries and the disparities that are happening within the nonprofit industry, and salaries that are happening in the for-profit industry are happening already. So what we need to do is like close that gap, even from an organizational perspective, when we're talking about sponsorships, and aligning the sponsor and letting them know that they are also now part of closing the gap. Getting them part of your side of the mission is going to help you gain that sponsors their trust as well. So those are my 3 highlights and high points of how to do donor relationships for BIPOC-led organizations and leveraging your social capital. And I will pass the baton on to either sales or nonprofit leadership. What are your 3 big takeaways?
Veronica, I'll let you take the floor. Or I'll take the baton if you don't want to.
Well, since she mentioned sale first, I think you should do that part first. Because I don't do much of my team sales by itself.
All right, perfect. Well, I'm pretty excited about what sales means to an organization. Again, like this is like you get to do anything in the whole world if you can sell it. And once you're great at sales, if you want to make fancy lamps that are that are in the female form, you get to do that. And if you want to sell software development, you get to do that too. It's the like sales prowess that really sets people apart. And I would say that so the first thing I would say is pay attention to how you buy and how you like to be sold to. And you do that for 2 reasons. One, it'll help you do things like never make a cold call. I don't know when the last time anyone picked up their phone when it was a cold call, but it's like the most annoying thing in the world. And somehow people still think that if they're going to like go out and get sales, that the first thing they have to do is pick up the phone and call randos. Well, I mean, obviously there are problems with that, but we know from a buyer perspective that we really hate that. So if that's a part of what you mentally think sales is, do yourself a favor and just get rid of it. You never have to do it. Absolutely. Okay, so yes, and don't cold call a sponsor either, right? So okay, so how do you get in front of those people? Well, you work your relationships, and you work your network. And when I coach clients, I have them take really, really good notes in a spreadsheet, and it's a little old school, but it gets you most of the way. And the notes in particular is really, really important because hopefully you're talking to, if you're in a development position full time, hopefully you're talking to 100 people a week, and you got to be able to keep those people straight and understand, like, all right, well, who was talking about how they're particularly incentivized by funding programs with children. You got to know that, so that when someone says, well, let's make this children focus, you can pull up your list of 20 people who are ready to give in that scenario. So so the first one is pay attention to how you buy and how you sell, or how you like to be sold to. And the second one is take really, really, really good notes. And then the third is to continue building relationships as an authentic person. One of the things that people are afraid of is sounding salesy. And one of the things that I coach clients on is to honor your comfort zone. There are so many things that you have to do in life that get you out of your comfort zone. And all of that is wonderful for personal development, but not sales. Sales, you need your comfort zone as a gut check for, do I sound awful? Do I sound pushy? Do I sound skeezy? So, because if you feel funny saying it, the person listening to you is definitely going to feel funny hearing it. So, so those are my 3 hot tips for you.
I love it. I love them, Ashley. You're absolutely right. Do not sound like, test yourself. I love talking about DEI stuff. I love talking about intercultural relationship building. I love talking about donorship building. I love talking about social capital and leveraging people of color in leadership positions. Those are the things I love talking about. People can hear that in my passion and my voice, but I don't think I can. I'm sorry, I don't think I can. Like, I didn't join Save the Whales, in nonprofit world, not because I don't believe in that, because it's not my authentic voice, but for finding what that is, and like where you can intersect that talent. It sounds to me like you're telling us that you can grow the skills of sales all day, every day, when you can't fake the funk of what you really love to do and want to talk about. Yeah. Thank you.
And relationships means everything in this business, right? And I like to say, the relationships doesn't come without accountability, right? From both ends. And how do we hold each other accountable, both in the support that we provide each other, but sometimes when we just fall through the cracks too, right? You need to be pulled back up. So relationship, I would say, is my number one thing. The other thing is really connecting with people that have your vision or matches your goals and your aspirations, right? Where do you want to take your organization? What is that next level? So really finding mentors, and not only one mentor. Don't stick to one person only. Find different perspectives. I think one thing that has helped me a lot is that just making those connections, and really finding those mentors in my path that taught me so many different things as I grew into my position as an organization director, right? Not entering the place with not knowing much, and then leaving the place with such a wealth of knowledge, thanks to the people that really jump in my empty wagon and said, I'll help you fill this empty wagon with more surprises if you want to. And really listening. Don't think that you know it all. Even if you think you know it, trust me, somebody else is going to provide you a different perspective that you're like, I never thought about that one. You're right. So really being humble and just bringing your best self into whatever that you're doing, and authenticity. To me, those, Ashley, you nail it, because being authentic in what you are offering, being authentic on who you are, is actually going to help you find the best funding of sources that you can find out there. Because if we start matching ourselves with what the funder wants, we will lose track very quick of what is it that we were going to be doing under organization X or B. So don't sell yourself low. Stick to your guns. And if that's what you want to offer and that's what you want to do, write your narrative in the way that tells the story that you want to hear, not the story that your funders want to hear, because you're not going to be happy. You might get your $1 million, but then you're going to regret your $1 million, because then you're not going to be able to spend the whole thing because you don't have what it takes to really deliver to that funder what you said, because you're not matching with the desires and the wants of that particular person.
Completely. That is such amazing advice right there. Not all money is good money. Not all contracts as a social entrepreneur is good. We might still be on the same team, but it just might not be our vibe right now. And that's okay. And that's really okay. One of my last tips too, going on what Veronica was saying, is surrounding yourself by people doing the same work, but in different cities or for different populations. And that's been very helpful, especially for someone like myself who's doing diversity, equity, and inclusion. And somebody was even in the comments like, what is that? Oh, I know, I hate these like jargon words. And when it comes down to, it's about getting along. So when I'm there, I'm like there to disrupt that narrative of like, it has to be these acronyms or it has to be this alphabet soup. No, there's real people behind this, behind these movements. There's real impact that's being helped and that's being done. And that is why the urgency that we had from the COVID past needs to keep on continuing for Brown and Black led organizations. That's why I'm really strong about it right now, because we're going back to the ways of old, where the regulations, the requirements, the barriers are there and they're getting higher and higher. We got someone from Midwest Mujeres, Jasmine was a participant, and Shadira has been a participant, and if not, one of my co-creators truly of Midwest Mujeres. She's seen all the iterations, and so she's also leading from some technical grants as well to grow her platform. So this is what we're all about. Jasmine's from Midwest Mujeres, and we just did an event, in-person event, maybe like 2 months ago. When I said I made an event for all of us to get paid, I was able to hire some virtual assistants from my community, and we were able to, they weren't virtual, they were in person actually, and they helped me just organize the event. And it was so amazing just to be able to have that all sponsored out and have that already in mind in my budget from the beginning, and having all of that part as a social entrepreneur, like the things that I've worked in budgets as a nonprofit are now helping me. And then things that I worked in for profit, like fundraising and sales, is still helping me be able to combine all of these things into a social entrepreneur network where, like I was explaining before, and making a micro capitalism happen with an increase of exchange within a group. So I'm trying to increase the exchange within my network of people so that we can all benefit from leveraging our social capital together. And we have some great leaders here today, Shanina Roche from Shades by You, Shades of Us, Shades of You, and Larissa Bañuelos as well. Gracias, Larissa, for coming back from Green Bay all the way here. We've been trying to meet up as well. And Rebecca as well, thank you so much for being here. Rebecca's part of a Latina speaker group that I belong to on WhatsApp. So when I say I try to stay connected on a national level, I really do. And we met each other in Milwaukee, and then I pulled her into this other chat because just like us, we're just trying to figure out, we're both social entrepreneurs. We want to impact the people that we're around, utilizing our talents and skills. And
I would say, Araceli, if I may interrupt you real quick, one last tip that I would say is that we as women don't invest in ourselves a lot. So really making sure that we're taking the time for that self-care, whatever that means to you, and really setting your boundaries too, because sometimes as directors of organizations, we are so overwhelmed with everybody pulling us in 100 different directions, and we got to get these deadlines done, and we got to do this, and we got to do that while taking care of a household, children, a sick dog.
A turkey tomorrow, honey, a turkey. Un guajolote, 15 libras.
Right? Put in the dinner for Thanksgiving. I mean, take care of yourself, please. Just take at least an hour a day or 3 hours a month or something that is just you, yourself, and you. Because really, I mean, if something that I have learned on the 11 years working on a very heavy trauma place, if anything I learned from that is that I need to take better care of myself. I'm not here to save the world. I'm not here to, make miracles. I'm just one person. And my journey is to continue to be as humble as I continue to be, but still try to make my mark in the world. But I need to make my mark on my own self, right?
Yeah.
How do I take care of me first, so that I could take care of others in a better light?
I love that so much, Veronica. And it's something that I think about a lot too, mostly because I think self-care has been so co-opted by like thin white women doing yoga. And there's so much in that is really valid in how you take care of yourself. And the way that I'm thinking about it now is in the way that we ask for help. And I have to tell you, so at the like height of pandemic parenting, as I have gained like 40 pounds as the pandemic has lingered on. And I hired a health and wellness coach, and I explained to her, like, man, I feel like the day starts and I'm beat. I don't have time to work. I feel exhausted by like 10 a.m. I am just not. And now you want me to like go for a run. It's not happening. And she said, oh, well, let's dig into your why. And she wanted to like Simon Sinek the situation. And I got so upset. It's like, I don't need to understand my why. I know my why. I need childcare. That is what needs to happen. And I think, it's something that we can get caught in, that there's a real difference between like, oh, like protect your mindset and make sure like bubble baths are super important to be taking, and taking time for yourself. Sometimes you just need help. And the ways that you ask for it and the ways that you self-advocate for that are really, really, really important. So Veronica, I totally agree.
Absolutely.
Oh my gosh, I'm loving this conversation. Does anyone have any questions as far as like, have we kind of addressed? Oh, Shadira has a question. Go ahead.
You're muted.
Sorry, more to introduce myself and to make a comment, because I was trying to take time for myself this morning. Everything that you guys have said resonates so much, because Araceli and Veronica are familiar with my being the vice chair of the police oversight civilian oversight board, and when this committee was put together, we had no idea, like as volunteers, the amount of time that was going to be put in, right? Like Veronica had already put in 4 years before this year was, before the board was created. And now we're finding out that it's like another 2-year process. Just once we now have the board, like getting to the next steps, but also because it's people of color, the community is okay with us just donating endless time, right? None of us, when we signed up, knew like that it was going to take hundreds and hundreds of hours of sacrifice. And so now in retrospect, we're like trying to figure out how people can get reimbursed for that time that they've invested. But also, like, for me to be able to do some of the nonprofit work that I do, I have to also be able to figure out how to do the for-profit at the same time, right? Like, how can I continue to sustain doing nonprofit work, but also be able to sustain my family and my own wellness? So I really appreciate the conversation here today, because it really helps keep things in perspective, and just to understand that that there are people out there that have expertise that we really should reach out and utilize. So I haven't shared any of my own personal like my website, because I'm still, Araceli has helped me some, but really what I need is to apply for a grant so that I can hire people rather than asking my friends to do work for me for free. I need to be paying my friends to be doing this kind of work. So thank you so much for this today. Gracias.
I saw you had unmiked. That's what I was gonna say. If not, I mean, I will definitely start looking for some of those grants, and actually I can maybe put our heads together as well.
And-
Because it's a long time coming to have a digital presence, and we can't afford not to anymore. We cannot afford not to have a digital presence anymore. It's costing us, and it's so silly that it should cost us, but it does cost our bottom dollar. And it's
Yeah.
unfortunate. And that needs to almost start putting into these sponsorship deals is just the maintenance of these platforms too. Okay. Just actually, how am I going to convert that into a sales thing? Because I will.
Yeah,
Well,
Mama,
it's like- we go
no, please
through
go ahead.
wanting a seat at the table, right? Like, oh, we need to have a seat at the table to be, you know, on public boards and things. And then it's like, I think a lot of times once we realize the time requirement of having a seat at the table, we're like, oh wow, like I can't believe what I signed up for. You know, that's kind of some of when we're taking part with nonprofits, right? But particularly in government, where, you know, government feels like they can utilize people of color, particularly women of color. So rather than hiring someone to translate things, instead it's like, oh, well, we'll just hire a bilingual person, but not pay them for that expertise, is what happens so often in nonprofits, but particularly in government. I see it a lot.
They, you know, they even do that in the profit world. I actually am not fluent, but once people are like, they sometimes maybe because I'm not dark enough in their eyes, or like, you know, and they won't know what I am, or they look at my last name and realize that's not my birth name. And once they realize I'm a Latina, they're like, oh, can you translate this for me? Or we have somebody who has a really bad, thick accent, and could you take this call? And I'm like, well, actually, I'm not fluent enough. And B, even if I was, I'm not being paid to do that. That's not my job. That's not even in my job description. But they feel no shame coming and expecting me to help them. Right. And that's a past experience that I've had.
And how do we set the tone, right? To make sure that, one, you hire me to do A and not B. And two, if you're going to allow me to do B, I need you to pay me more, right? Because I'm not going to do both of what you're asking, because I was not hired, right, to do that. But it's interesting how just because we have an accent, people think that we understand every single accent in the world. That to me, that's, you know, I have that been asked of me so many times, Rebecca, both in the corporate world and in the nonprofit world, when they get clients that don't even speak English or Spanish. And because they have a thicker accent, then my ear is supposed to be trained somehow to understand every single accent in the world just because I have one, right? So, and sometimes I want to say, yeah, I should add that to my resume, that I have an accent talent, so that you can send everybody that don't speak your language over to me, and then I can make some good money in that organization. Because it's just ridiculous how people sometimes ignorance gets in the way of people's thinking, unfortunately.
And I also, so go ahead.
Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, I apologize. I started a few minutes later because I got caught up with some things, but so many things resonated here, you know, with what everybody has been saying and sharing, especially, you know, when it comes for asking for help and getting that help, and setting those boundaries so that we're not feeling like we have to do this. You know, how do we say no to this person or that? And even I think with our children, especially as so many families transitioned and had to do everything online, and they were the teacher, the principal, you know, and the parent, right? And the friend, because they were missing their friends too, is even letting our children know, because even at small ages, we can teach them that we need a little help, and this is what, I need from you, and teaching them that maybe that I need a 5-minute break. And let's all take a 5-minute break. You go color or do something, of your activity. But I, as the parent or guardian, need to go and do whatever it is, whether that's writing, whether it's just going to the bathroom and just being at peace without having, somebody knocking and saying, I need help, or, just 5 minutes. And I know for myself, breathing exercises are so there's scientific proof that it can change your parasympathetic nervous system and actually help with anxiety and calm you down and lower that heart rate, even in just a few minutes. And so reaching out to each other for support, I think, is huge. Not being afraid to say, I'm struggling. I know I had a recent experience where I finally did get the money, but guess what? Even though I specifically told them I don't have this skill set or this skill set, and I want to learn this, oh, you'll be fine. Everybody has all these different skill sets on the team. You'll be fine. Well, when I got on the team and all of a sudden I'm on this project, I reached out for help saying, I don't know which form to use. Help me to translate and put this project on this form and utilize this system. I really didn't get anything. And 3 weeks on the project, no feedback. You're doing fine. Just keep going. And I'm like feeling something inside because I'm also intuitive. I'm like, this isn't right. And guess what? I was let go. No feedback, no warning. And this is a company that is branding themselves as diversity, and we're ahead of the game, and we donated 100 million, towards Blacks and this and that. I'm like, well, I'm a Latina. I'm 100% Puerto Rican. I have passion for this. I want to learn. I have a good attitude. I asked for help. And after 3 weeks on the project, you let me go and you didn't even tell me why. They just said to the contractor, she's underperforming. So I feel that what it woke up to me is, I bet you there's a lot of other people who are struggling. Maybe they're not let go, but they're kind of like, they're feeling that tension and pressure that they're not meeting the needs of the company, or they're being micromanaged, or they know they're being talked about, but they're not telling the person to their face because there's no transparency. And then we just consume it especially as people of color, because it's like we have this, they're looking at us through a different lens, and it's not right. And we're not changing it. And all these programs, people are talking about it, having bold conversations, but the actions aren't there. Because we're still feeling that. We're still struggling, and we want to succeed. We want to rise up. We don't want to maybe stay at this level. We want to go up levels, or we want to expand, but it's not there. And then I feel that, especially as women, we really take that on, and we might internalize it, or we start picking at our head saying, well, I should know this, or maybe I need to go back to school, or maybe I'm just not smart enough. Maybe this is just, we start picking at our head instead of listening to our soul and letting our soul lead our head, saying, no, they hired me for a reason, right? And if other companies are all doing this, so then where do we go? How do we support each other? Because if I go out and search for, which I did, I said, okay, here's Agile type of certificate. Well, the lowest I could get that 4-day class down to was $2,300. Well, if I'm unemployed and I don't have income coming in, how do I come up with $2,300? Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And so, even this group here is fantastic to start brainstorming, because also I feel as minorities, we need to be heard. We need to do more. We need to expect more from others, so that we are given those opportunities and paid our worth.
And Rebecca, I think something that resonated with me is that knowledge sharing, right? We enter into these positions not knowing anything. And sometimes we are blessed finding people that want to help you out, but sometimes we have the people that know it all and refuses to share their knowledge, right? And when I started this work, I made a promise to myself that everything I learn, I'm going to give back because it doesn't belong to me. Somebody gave it to me, I'm going to give it back. And that's how I live and I lead. Because if we as women don't support each other and help each other out and lift each other up, nobody else is going to do that for us, right? So I'm sorry that happened to you, but I'm at the same time wanting to just call out the organization and say, you people suck, and because that's my nature, that's who I am, calling people out, right? But I think, I encourage everyone on this call to, if you have any knowledge of anything, be willing to share that with others. And don't be afraid of sharing that knowledge with other people. And don't be that stuck up person. I'm like, well, no, I'm going to let you drown just like I drowned, right? Because some people have that mentality. I drowned. It cost me to learn what I learned, and I'm not going to share it with you, right? So be willing to do that. Ada, should we talk about dissecting grants before we go, or?
There was, I think, one more question.
Laura, did you have or earlier I saw you come off mic. Did you have a comment or question or?
I was just gonna, so many little nuggets, like, I don't want to go too much into my own little personal story. Doesn't matter. But I think one thing I did learn so much over this past year, dealing with a lot of trauma and a lot of like creating my whole life all over again, was I had to look really hard at who I had around me. Like, who were the people closest to me and why? And were they the right people to have in my life? And especially my like close circle, and then the next circle out, and then the next circle out. And I shifted a lot of that big time, actually, huge. And I had to like care more about how I felt about it versus what they felt about it. And the self-care was definitely a huge part of that. Whether it was getting, yes, the organic fair trade bubble bath, that's really inexpensive actually, and smells amazing. Or deciding to put a journal with colorful pens in my bathroom. So when I did have that time, I could just sit and like brain dump. And it's literally gotten to the point now. Let's see, it was Rebecca who was mentioning the breathing exercises. I was so good at teaching those breathing exercises to some of my clients before they would have to take a certain kind of test, so they could bring their blood pressure down and, and be in a better place before this test. And it worked for them. Hell, if I ever did it for myself. So I did learn to do some meditation, some guided meditation, some breathing exercises before bed every night. And it's literally gotten to the point where if I use the same dude, my dog groans, like she's so sick of his voice. So I would love to know if we know of any BIPOC grant writers, because unfortunately I only know white girls who are currently getting into grant writing, and that's not who we're looking for here. So if there's anybody that can like get on my LinkedIn and send me messages, is what I'm saying.
Okay,
and I'd love to connect with anybody.
Yes, and we have Veronica that writes grants. Shadir needs a grant. So if you hear of grants, and
I write grants, I just
she
need
writes
to
grants.
find a grant.
Please find the grant. And Shanita also is expanding her platform, and Shades of You, Shades of Me. Thank you for putting that LinkedIn in there as well. Feel free to connect with me too for any types of talks on intersectionality, workplace, relationship building, how to get a sponsor, how to move about in this digital space world. And let's do it with camaraderie. Let's do it with our with our eyes wide open and our hands open as well, so that we can grab each other by our hand and be like, come over here, over here. Because sometimes we do need to grab them. Someone's pulling us, or we're about to go this way. But can we still? Yes. How do we connect? Maybe put down email addresses into the chat as well. Do we have any final questions or things that we haven't really explained to detail that you would love to hear? Either like, how do I can build my sales team better? How can I survive in nonprofit leadership positions without tokenism and like severe emotional scarring? Ooh, who can write that book is going to make a lot of money. Who can write that
I don't
book?
think you need that book until you need that book.
That is very true. That is very true. You don't need that book until we need that book. And we've all sat on boards before. And that's another thing too, is like, check out the agency that you want to go into. And perhaps being part of the board is a better answer than actually working for them.
Yeah, and I want to say for the grant, Laura, the grant writing piece, you know, I learned a lot on the last 11 years on grant writing and all of that. And I remember the first time I opened a grant to write a grant on my own, and I closed it back as I started crying. I'm like, oh my God, I can't do this. I'm gonna lose what I have. And what am I doing? What am I doing? It's like, you know, like the little guy on this movie. I can't remember the name of the movie. Little creature that goes like, we're all gonna die. That was my mode, right? The ship is sinking, we're all gonna die. I don't know how to do this. But the minute I again found myself a mentor that helped me understand federal grants from top to bottom, state grants, look, any grant from top to bottom. And I remember the first time I wrote my first grant on my own and I got the money, I was like, oh my God, I did this. Wow. And then I developed a system, right? It's just about of how do you dissect this whole process, and not, you know, some people take a grant and read the whole entire thing, and that builds up anxiety and more anxiety and more anxiety. And you're like, oh God, I can't do this, right? So knowing where you need to go, on that RFP to identify quickly right away if your mission meets the needs of this grant or the purpose and criteria of the grant. That's where you need to go first. Purpose, criteria, and then dissect the grant in terms of project description, all of these other things, the outcomes, activities, resources, all of that stuff that the grant is asking, and building your grant around all of those aspects. But if you have good narrative on the work that you're doing already. And if you don't, I suggest you start writing narratives in regards to your project, your target population, your activities, the outcomes of these things. What is your objective?
Y'all are part of my scheme right here. All of y'all.
All of that has to be, you know, you have to have all of those components, because bringing your grant writer is one thing, but giving a grant writing just a grant and no background of your organization and not having narratives out there, it's not going to work. You're going to waste your money hiring somebody if you don't already have established those narratives and those pieces of information that a grant writer needs. And based on that, grant writers are storytellers. Who doesn't? I mean, I love telling stories, right? So I apply that to my grant writing. If I see that there is the work being done and the passion is there to do it, and I go with that. But I recommend that if none of you or some of you don't have your narrative in place, to start dissecting that and creating pieces of narratives that really tells the story of the work you're doing, matches to the statistics that are out there. You know, the internet is filled with statistics, right? If you're in the arena of equity and inclusion, look at everything that is have been put out there by the city and the county in the last 3-4 years in terms of that. Know your numbers, and then tell your story. And how does those numbers, how do you make an impact based on what the statistics say, right? What is the impact that you want to make based on what all that resource and information that you have found out there is? And once you have all of that, you're ready to sit down and really dismantle this grant, and making sure that when you submit those grants, you are very clear of what is expected of you. What are the grants awarded post-award in requirements that you need to give your grant administrator. Sometimes we apply for grants and then we forget to read the fine print, right? And that's when that's when we had to return all the money back because we didn't follow the regulations, right? On the grant. Build a timeline on your grants. You know, when is it due? What are the documents, pieces of information I have to include on my grant? Check the section with all the exhibits. If you have, you know, the county grants ask you for a whole bunch of different exhibits. They talk about their affirmative action policies, discrimination policies, award documents. Just make sure that when you are dissecting this grant, before you sit down and start writing, that you create a little timeline of what is it that you need. Create your own checklist based on the checklist that is provided on your document, and then you'll be fine.
My gosh, thank you. I even wrote down, I need to start writing my narratives for every program that I've done, because as a social entrepreneur, I'm just like, woo, I just want to go and save the world. Mind me, I don't need numbers. I really don't need money. But I do. Okay, so I think not just for grant writing, but for sponsorship development, having those narratives are super important. If you're a one-hit wonder like I am, you're going to want to know what you just did before so that you can repeat. And then maybe you might even repeat it to make it a business, like Ashley has done as well with my VA, Grox, which I'm sure did not start off as like a social entrepreneur, but more just like, I'm solving a problem. And that is how we make our solving our problem, our business, our social entrepreneurism. How does all those values come together? And I think if we each start taking time and writing about that information for each other, for ourselves, we're going to be able to level up our salaries and our budgets much faster. See, any last words, Ashley? Anyone else have any other things we want to, how we can end today? Thank you so very much for everybody participating in the chat. I have saved the chat as well, and we'll save that and send it out. Yeah.
I have a question.
Yeah.
So, Veronica, I know that you've been in this sphere for quite some time. Do you create like spreadsheets, or how do you know when, you know, there's upcoming grants that you apply for, or, you know, how do you identify that? I mean, how are you notified?
Okay, so personally, well, there's different ways. One, you register to some listservs that are out there. You know, the city, the county, the state, and the federal all have listservs for you to get information in terms of when grants are coming, and then you get that. But once you, whether you get the grant or you don't get the grant, I have a tally of all the grants that I have applied for, with the check mark if I got it, or an X if I didn't get it. One thing that I do is I request on every grant that I don't get, I request the review notes. So that helps me next time that grant comes around to focus on the areas that my proposal wasn't strong and really rewrite that narrative in a different way. So, but I asked for every single grant that I did not get. I called the administrator and say, can you please send me the reviews for the grant? And they usually send them to you. But then every month, 2 times a month, I take 2 days, full days of just searching the net for grants. I go everywhere I could possibly imagine to go and related to the work that I do. And I look at grants. If the grants already passed, I write them down and I write the deadline of that grant on my tally sheet so that I know next year to look for this particular grant around this time. And then I know. When you have grants, there's two different types of grants, or 3. There is your competitive grant, which means that once you apply, once that grant proposal gets open, that's open to the entire area, whoever does that work can apply for it. Once you get the grant goes into non-competitive status, and the non-competitive status might be a 2-year to 3-year grant, which means that for 3 years, you're going to have the same amount of money, regardless of the market change, right? Regardless of anything, whether your capacity increase, you're still going to be stuck with the same amount of money for those 3 years. After the 3-year comes, the grant reopens again competitive, and everybody again gets to apply for your money and their mama's money in between, right? So you might get your money back, you might not, right? But what I do is that I keep a spreadsheet, an Excel spreadsheet for grants that I have, and then to know when that grant is going to be into reapplication. If it's a non-competitive grant, it goes into reapplication usually before 2 months before the end of the year, that I have to submit my report, which is reapplication for that grant, will be then in the form of an update to the guarantee person. What did you do with the money last year? Numbers, data, all the stuff that they ask you. And then I know on my other sheet when the grants that are non-competitive are going to become competitive, so that I prepare myself to start writing that grant when it's there. But at least 2 times a month, I just sit and do nothing but search for grants for DAMA to see what's out there in the art world that we can tap into in relationships to education and youth and children and all that stuff. And I keep myself a little spreadsheet with the information. And I can share the sheet that I use, Shanita, if that helps. I can email it to you.
See how this happens? See this love? This is all Midwest Mujeres love. and Midwest women coming together and networking so that we can all build our equity in our spaces. And it's so important because we're trying to close these gaps: education gap, wage gap, the funding gap. This is the way we're going to do it. It's by information sharing and sharing our network so that we can, and sharing our best hacks. Because between us and the resources in that time, there are people that are hurting perhaps from our lack of being there too, or just the lack of opportunities that they might see. So it's important that we show up being taking care of ourselves. I thought that was a really beautiful theme to add into this. It was totally serendipitous and unplanned, but considering the holidays are just around the corner, yes. And from what I've heard, the people that are in work or even looking for better jobs right now are being pulled into 3 or 4, 2 more roles on top of the role they're already doing because they can't find enough people to work. And so I know a lot of people are just like, like, I can't move forward, I can't move back because I'm trapped. And so in that time period, when you're feeling that trap, lean into your network, lean into the people that you know around you to see how you can either move your way onto a better position, or you're starting your own consulting business on the side, and now is the best time to start it. Why not?
Mhm.
And with that, we're gonna head on out of this workshop. Thank you so much, everyone who's come today. Does anyone else have any more questions, comments, ideations? Last call for alcohol. Last call. So this is gonna be the first call of many calls, and we're really
Hey,
excited.
Araceli, thank you so much in particular for you for being such an amazing advocate for everyone in your community and for putting this together and making sure that everyone in your sphere is better for knowing you. I'm really grateful.
Oh my gosh, yes, absolutely. Because we all have this. We all have our missions that we want to grow on. And I'm just as strong as y'all's missions because everyone's having some really good missions. And that's the thing. It's like once we get more clear on our mission and our vision, and once we have those, like Veronica was saying, start writing down and connecting with your narratives. You have something there. You have room either for more sponsorships, more deals, more sales. It's exciting. Exciting. Thank you all.
Well, thank you all.
Adios. Bye-bye.
Bye.